Thanks so much for joining us for another episode of Enlightened Conversations, where we invite our hosts and guests to share their views on the world, work, and their personal lives in an enlightened way. This season, we're also looking forward to engaging more with our audience, hearing your enlightened views, and answering questions and topics you would like us to weigh in on. Today's episode is hosted by Michelle Lightworker. Hi, everyone, and welcome to Enlightened Conversations. This is Michelle Lightworker, and I am blessed to have a wonderful being who I have had the pleasure of actually, you could say, working alongside in relation to other projects as well. Beth Bell joining me. Beth, welcome all the way from the USA.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, I know. It's so exciting. And I'm really glad Dr. Lana Marconi reached out to me and mentioned that you had this new book that you're launching, and it sounded so interesting. And I gosh, even not reading anything about it, I would have been interested to talk to you about it. But for those of you who don't know Beth, I'll just introduce her formally to you. So a rising star turned marketing executive, Beth spent more than 15 plus years leading strategic brand planning for the pharmaceutical industry, but somewhere between C-suite level meetings and marketplace assessments, Beth began listening more closely to the world around and within her. What she learned led her eventually to ditch her corporate life to pursue what life's purpose of that was calling her, which was pollinating the planet with love. And as her inward journey deepened, Beth became known as the flower whisperer and forged new paths, first as an entrepreneur designing silver jewellery in Bali, and then as a radio TV host and author. And additionally, she's a multi-dimensional advisor for CEOs and psychedelic pharmaceutical companies. Beth currently lives in America with her rescue dog, Lily. And in her newest book, which we can chat about today, is called Angels, Herpes and Psychedelics, in which Beth divulges her unlikely journey of spiritual awakening, from romantic encounters to toad venom visions to angels in blue jeans. And Beth's story exposes that the soul's true path can get messy, irrational, and even downright dangerous. Welcome, Beth. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, thank you.
I love that little summary. Like, oh my God, tell me more.
Yeah, well, and when you said toad venom visions, I always like to say, and this is the toad, because a lot of people are like, what is this little guy doing on the cover of the book? But
cool.
That's the toad that has the venom. So yes,
Sweet.
we can talk all about that if you're interested.
Yes, definitely. And I think, look, I've known you since I think it was 2017, maybe, that I was executive producer on 5D TV, and I know that Lana was working with you and mentioned her work that you were doing with 5D TV. And all the flower whispering in your radio show, and it just sounded so beautiful. And just so that you know, back in 2001, when I started my counselling practice, I specialised in addiction recovery. Okay. So lots of interest in the drug therapies and things like that, and therapeutic withdrawals and the effects of everything. But also in my counselling practice, I was really guided to use bush flower essences as a recovery tool as well. So so I really resonate. I fell into that. So I really resonate with the flower realm, and I found it very therapeutic, not only for myself and my clients, but pretty much for, I would say, the first 10 years of my kids' lives. Never had to take them to a doctor, just got the bush flower essences, which are homeopathic in nature, and they were right as rain. So yeah, there you go.
Yeah, no, we did. We met in Australia when I came over I was living in Bali, and Lana was interviewing me about being a flower whisperer. So yeah, it was a fun time, and it's the flowers that have really catapulted me in so many ways on my spiritual journey. So yeah, it's fun to be here today, many years later.
I know, it's amazing. So how did it go from the flower whisperer to more interest in this area that you're now delving into, which sounds phenomenal?
Well, it was a time when I was in my corporate executive position and I knew I needed to meditate. I was deep in my spiritual journey, but meditation was so darn hard and I just couldn't do it. Like I'd spend that 15 minutes and go, oh, I can't get that 15 minutes back.
Mm.
And then the universe put a nice camera in my hand, sent me on a trip to Hawaii. And I just became mesmerized by flowers and just continued to photograph them and photograph them. And then over time, I realized that I was getting messages from flowers. And so that's how I became known as the flower whisperer. But as we know, it's really just the ability of the ego mind to quiet so that we can hear our soul speak. And so that's what the flowers were doing for me. They were sort of that conduit, or I like to call them my divine portal, because it brought me to that really quiet space and place. And then of course, living in Bali, that took flowers to a whole nother level. And then it took Mother Nature to a whole nother level,
I know,
and how
right?
we connect to source energy and all we can learn from Mother Nature, not only immersing ourselves in it, but just watching and witnessing how easy, the flowers flow, the grass grows, the trees blossom, and we make it so difficult as humans. And so Mother Nature has been just an amazing teacher for me. Well, fast forward, a friend of mine had, because I think, you wanted to get into like, well, what are you doing with psychedelics now? I think
Yeah,
that's where
yeah.
you were headed with that question.
Mm.
Yeah. And so I've always been an anti-drug person, like not even cannabis, marijuana, like just an absolute no-go. And a friend of mine had been diagnosed with breast cancer and worked with a psychedelic and got just amazing insights. It changed the whole trajectory. And she said, you should try this. And I said, yeah, thank you, but no, I've just done 20 years of deep dive spiritual work, and the last thing I want to do is lose my mind. And so I said no to that. And then I had also interviewed on my show, Pollinating the Planet with Love, a gentleman, Louis Schwartzberg, who I think even in Australia he would probably be quite famous. He does all the time lapse cinematography, like where the flowers are opening gradually. And he also produced the Fantastic Fungi, that documentary, if you're familiar.
Yes,
So
yes.
yeah. So I was interviewing him and talking. I want to talk about flowers. He want to talk all about mushrooms. And then we ended up talking about San Pedro and ayahuasca. And yeah, so he said, Beth, if you get the opportunity in the right set and setting, you really should try, one of these medicines. And so at some point I came to the fact of, wait, I know the power of flowers. I know the power of Mother Nature. Why am I scared of a little cactus? Right. Which is what San Pedro was. So that was the first dive that I went into psychedelics and had an amazing journey. And it really opened up a lot for me. So that was how I sort of got into it. And then of course there's many, many stories I can tell.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting. So yeah, I often wonder about that, like even to the point of, like pharmaceuticals versus herbs, or pharmaceuticals versus vitamins, or but like pharmaceuticals based on those things. Like it's kind of like it's I think it's what it comes down to. I think all at any point in time is what feels right for ourselves too, because if we are listening to our spiritual guidance and our intuitive system, and we are guided to do that, that's just us keeping an open mind, I think. And that's one of my principles. So I think, and I remember reading an article in which you talked about openness and willingness were really important. And willingness and open-mindedness are two of my 12 principles that I actually operate by. And I haven't had any psychedelics, but I'm certainly interested to find out a bit more about how they impact and work and open and unlock and things like that. And whether that is part of, I guess, a moderated way, because, they're obviously a lot of the time, as you're saying, they're done in settings that are actually where it's a microdose, or whether where you've got the support there, and whether that, because I know a deep meditation, and sometimes some people with specific ways of learning find it very difficult to meditate, whether or not those there are alternatives there to help people to see the bigger picture. Because I remember you talking about the ego death and feeling really connected to everyone and everything, and that was massive for you, like the biggest experience you could have had. And to get to that point, that's life changing for some people when they actually experience that there's that exists, that you could feel like that.
Yeah. Well, you bring up a lot of really great points. And I think you, for sure, you and probably a majority of your listeners are all on a super deep dive and you're highly conscious. So you go, well, why would I need to try psychedelics? Just like me, like, why would I need to lose my mind? But what happened is we talk about and we intellectualize and we know and we live by a lot of these concepts. But what psychedelics did for me is they helped me embody these intellectual concepts on a whole nother level, on a way that is almost indescribable. So one of the experiences that you were just referencing was I had an opportunity, which I again, I was kind of like, wow, I'm so surprised that I'm here, but I had an opportunity to do bufo, which is the venom off of a toad's back. They crystallize it, you smoke it in a pipe, and you actually pass out almost immediately. So even then you would say, so why in the heck would you do this? But what happens is it basically gives your brain a reset and it shuts down your default mode network. So you get this opportunity to just hear your higher self. All the programs aren't playing, all the programs aren't running, and you just enter into, well, not everybody has the same experience, but for me in that particular session, I was able to completely dissolve. It felt like somebody took a bucket of acid and poured it all over my body and all over my mind, and I absolutely did not exist. And it's not something anyone can intellectually understand, but when you experience it, and then you experience the bliss of divine oneness. I mean, I got to tell you, like, I've done a lot of different spiritual modalities, and the word oneness always sounded really great, but I was always a bit frustrated. Like, okay, but really, like, what does that really mean? Like at the highest sense, what does that really mean? And once you are shown that and you experience that, it's just, there's no turning back. So I like to look at psychedelics as a North Star. Psychedelics alone are not going to enlighten anyone because you're still going to come back to your programs. And if you don't do the integration work and you don't actually, you don't have a spiritual toolbox, then you just go back to all of the external, stimuli that are telling you all the narrative. So it is important to do the integration work, but I really like the idea of people thinking of it as a North Star. So it gives you embodiment of the spiritual concepts that you're able to intellectualize, but perhaps not get to that next level of embodiment. And so that's where I think the spiritual community is probably some of the, well, not that I want to say best, but probably some of the most equipped people to take the lessons and learnings from psychedelic spiritual medicines, plant-based medicines, because we have the toolbox. So when you sort of shoot yourself out there and you start understanding all these concepts and all this expanded states of consciousness, when people come back here, if they don't have the toolbox, or they've never studied or understood like other realms, or they don't understand the third dimension versus the fifth dimension or higher dimensions, it can be really overwhelming. And then sometimes what happens is people want to keep going there, but not do the work. And once you already have that spiritual foundation and that toolbox, you have a bridge. But for some people, and I will say that, look, anything can be addictive. Donuts can be addictive, right? So, but by nature, psychedelics are not, they're not working on receptors that are addictive. You typically don't want to jump back into a journey because you see the work that it brings forward. It basically opens up your subconscious mind and brings forward things that you've suppressed and repressed, and things that I still 100% say, do the spiritual work, do the longer road, because that's the road that is more natural. And, but when you're ready and you feel called to do something more, then psychedelics can step in and really put some things on fast forward for you to get you through some of the, the pain bodies and break through them. Not that faster is important, but sometimes it can be a much quicker process.
I really resonate with what you're saying there. When I was back in 95, when I was studying Steiner education, Rudolf Steiner, they were talking about how I guess how drugs affect each of our bodies, like our astral body, our etheric body, or our chi body. And they were talking about how if you get too high, you can expand out and learn, like you can like touch concepts that are a bit removed from you that you can't quite grasp down here. But if you haven't got the sensibilities of how to integrate that learning back, it can totally get lost. It can literally be forgotten, or it can like I think in the case of some I guess some drugs and things like that can create psychotic episodes as well, because they're sort of moving people into a space like marijuana. It can balloon out the etheric body, which makes people feel comfortably numb. But then what they're doing is they're pushing out the astral body, so that it's almost like if there's too much feelings, too much emotions, too much unresolved stuff in that astral body, and then your chi body is inflated like a balloon, and it keeps getting thinner and thinner and thinner. What can happen is it can crack, and then all the astrality, all the unresolved feelings can just overwhelm, can come in and so people can have those things. It's like and get addicted to that, like that process of avoiding, pushing things away and all that kind of stuff. But that, like what you're saying is that there's, if you understand, I guess, how the drugs work in different ways and what they're doing, then you can work with them in a different way.
Yeah. Well, you said a lot of really great things that I just want to see if I can touch on. There is a very small percentage of people that do have psychotic breaks, and that has to do with a lot of factors, probably. So it can happen. I think, but even more so, but it's not very likely, but even more so, because you're making really important points about the ethereal body, about our energy, about our soul, our soul's plan, and opening ourselves up to entities and different energies in other realms. And so that's where I am also a huge spokesperson for psychedelics, but I always say, setting, and server. And those three things are important. Your mindset going in.
Yes.
Set your intentions. Whatever you're going to get is already predetermined, but it's important that you set your intentions, because there's other energies that can take you doing other things. So mindset is important.
Engages your will, and it goes back to that willingness that we talked about, where your will is engaged. And if your will's engaged and your intention is set, then there's it's not as easy to be derailed, or at least when things come up that could derail you, you're a bit more, you've got more of your higher self on board with it.
Yes, for sure. And then the setting is, where are you at? I mean, as a light worker, like there's energies everywhere, and you wouldn't go do, a meditation or a singing bowl session in a place that was filled with entities or lower vibrational energies. You would clear it first, right? So you want to be in a setting that is energetically clear. Now, you may not be, not you, but the listeners may not be like the expert on clearing the energy, but that's where the server comes in, and you want to make sure that you're with someone that knows how to clear the space, that can hold the space, right? That can hold the container for everybody that's coming in, because a lot of times you're doing a group, and there again, that's the setting, right? So if it's a group, find out who's coming to this group. Is this people that are coming with clear intentions, with the idea of expanding consciousness? Or are these people coming to just shoot themselves out there and feel better momentarily? Are they there to do the work? Or are they recreational users that sign up for these journeys to just go on a trip? So there's a huge difference energetically. So and then the server, I mean, it's becoming a little bit of a fad lately that people are doing ayahuasca and, all these different things, which are all beautiful medicines. But a lot of times the server, they've gone to the Amazon or whatever, and all of a sudden they're certified as a shaman. It's like people think they're a shaman, and it's like, well, there's sort of quite a lineage that comes, an ancestral lineage that comes with being able to serve ayahuasca. So understanding the medicines and having worked with the medicines and people for years, if not generations, is really important. So when you go to sit, don't do it because your friend went somewhere and had a good trip. Do it because you vibrate when you talk to the server, the voice, the vibration of their voice. Does it feel like it's resonating with you and where you are in your life? Don't just jump into these things, right? It's like your soul. So you wouldn't just go out onto the street and hand a stranger your soul and say, here, see what you can show me.
I like that.
So those things are really important. And it incorporates what you were talking about with our aura and our energy and entities and our soul plan. Super important.
I think it's common sense what you're saying. I mean, you wouldn't go deep sea diving without a buddy, would you? Right?
You wouldn't, but you would be surprised what people do. People get caught up in these things and, it's all spiritual. And it's like, but you're still in charge of your soul's plan and your meat suit and your vehicle and your body and your energy system. So
exactly. Oh wow, that's great. No, and so how did the angels and this herpes come into the title? Are they two different stories?
Well, honestly, the book spans about 20 years of my life, and
Yeah.
angels came in. First of all, I'll say the title came from Spirit. Spirit
Cool.
said, "You will name this book Angels, Herpes, and Psychedelics." And I said, "Yeah, no." Really? Are you kidding me? But it was so clear, I couldn't deny it. Many people have asked me to change it. My publisher, the
Right.
cover designer, I mean, like you name it, people have said, yeah, that's just going to turn a lot of people off. And I recognize that it might, but then they're probably not the right readers yet. But they will come around. So angels is all about, we have earth angels, people that come into our life and help support us. And we also have celestial angels, right? So there's paranormal experiences that we have. And we know we have our guardian angels. And so it's really looking to our support system and knowing that we're never alone in the universe. We're always connected to everyone. And so angels made the cover for that reason. And I talk a lot about earth angels and celestial angels and how they helped me along my awakening journey.
And
then
I imagine the servers are angels in blue, not blue jeans potentially, maybe in other outfits, but yeah, holding the space. Gosh, that's angelic. That's I believe when we get to that place, when we're able to hold the space, that is an angelic ability. So yes, give them that.
No, you're right. They're there shining the light for us and showing the way and just asking us to emulate what they're teaching us. So, and again, there's still an element of our own higher self, angels in other realms. So so that's part of the cover. And then herpes is a really important part of the book. I share a very vulnerable story about how I contracted herpes, and I did it because I did it, meaning put it into the book and put it onto the cover, because people have so much shame and trauma around herpes. And it's not just herpes, but it's whether it's sexual abuse or whatever it is, whatever your trauma is, if it's a big T or a little t, it's holding you back in some way of really knowing who you really are and stepping into your fullest power. So it's just hitting some tough topics head on. And so herpes made the cover for that, but it also made the cover because I think one of the most important things right now is the mind viruses. And that is what we need to work through, because they're programs, as we know, they're installed sometimes consciously, unconsciously, coming at us left and right from whether it's the media, our communities. And it's just understanding well, what is the mind virus that's at play here? Because that's the most important part of it. So that's why that made the cover.
Yeah, wow. Well, that's amazing. I know there's a lot of shame around herpes, and when I was doing bush flower essences, one of the bush flowers that we helped people to recover from herpes and had lots of success with was a specific one that was related to being burnt in previous lives, like literally on being burnt at the stake and things like that. So people had trauma around being a light worker, being burnt at the stake, being also having reactions to radiation in the sun and things like that. And so taking like a homeopathic dose of this, people would get like rebirth, like if they've had a sunburn and they've had a bikini mark, the radiation would come out and you could see that the bikini mark when they had the sunburn and things like that. So it was about releasing the fear of being a light worker, releasing the fear of either trauma related to being oppressed and snuffed out, literally. So my relationship with herpes has been one of transformation for people. Like I just look at that and go, oh, that's deep. So that's why I was like, oh wow, are these two different stories? Because from my perspective, we step into our angelic nature when we release our fear of being a light worker.
Yeah, well, and I look at herpes sort of like, I'm not a biblical person, but I grew up Christian, and I just remember the story of the lepers in the Bible, and that's that energy. And my first draft of my book, I actually didn't didn't say that I had a positive on the herpes virus. I said, oh, I got exposed. Because I thought, well, I'll just gently, talk about it. And then COVID happened, and it was like, okay, no, everyone now knows what virus shame is. Like in the very beginning of COVID, if someone got COVID, don't tell anybody, And so I started to realize, no, like the virus shame is alive and prevalent, and we need to just stop all of this ridiculousness of shaming people and making people feel isolated for these, whether it's herpes or something else. So so that's just a really important part. Now, I do have an awakening and healing handbook on my website that I'd be happy to put if you have additional remedies and different things that you want to put into the handbook, because a lot of people have given lots of remedies for herpes. But I just had a talk with a sexologist actually, and we were talking about how herpes for people can just be such a beautiful check engine light. Because if you think that you're getting a herpes outbreak, whether it's oral herpes or genital herpes, you know that your body's out of balance. You know that you're probably too acidic, and you need to be more alkaline. You know that you probably aren't getting enough sleep. You know that you probably have too much stress and that your cortisol levels are too high. So, it's really about how you're going to frame it. And when we know the law of attraction. So if you fear something, you bring it near, right? When you don't fear something and you heal it energetically and you heal the virus of the mind, then the actual viruses, whether it's COVID or herpes or whatever else the next virus is going to be, you just separate yourself from the fear of it and you don't attract it. It's just a whole different way of thinking. And if you do attract it and you do have it, then you just have a different response to it. So it's always about our response to things, whether it's in our body or in the external environment.
Yeah. And I 100% agree with you. I mean, I got herpes as a kid. I remember seeing a sore in one of my Christmas photos when I was 9 or something. So it was in my family. Like, sometimes you catch it from drinking a cup, or like it's easy to pass on. Like it's not hard to get. And so for me, whenever I get something like a tingling or something going on, usually I get it on my mouth. I don't think I've had it anywhere else that I can remember, but usually I'll get it on my mouth, and I just find that it's a warning sign for me to take better care of myself, because I'm being challenged in a way that's oppressing me. And I have potentially succumbed to it, and I haven't noticed it. And I need to really get myself sort of back into my own light worker driver's seat rather than being in an oppressive environment. So it's really good. Like and it can sometimes happen when I know I'm going to be challenged. It's almost like you can feel it coming. And so it's almost like a preparation, and go, oh, look. So it's a buddy. It's not a, I don't look at it like it's something to be ashamed of whatsoever. And when I see people who have it, like if they have something going on, I'm in a lot of compassion for them. I was watching a TV show the other day, and it was all about two gay men who wanted to get married, and one of them had a lot of shame around the fact that he was with his partner for 7 years and still he wasn't willing to step into the marriage thing. And I just noticed there was one of those coming up, and I was like, oh, this is interesting. He's coming into this place where he has to stand in front of people and talk, and it's coming up. And so straight away I thought that my heart went out to him and went, wow, this is a really big moment for you to be in your light and to be yourself. And so I'm glad you talk about it. I'm glad you bring it out of the shameful corners and you put it on the front cover. Well done.
Spirit, thank you. Yeah,
definitely.
And then psychedelics is obvious. We talked about that it was just really, a North Star in embodying a lot of the spiritual concepts that we've all studied for so many years and understand. So, so it's, and again, I'm such an anti-drug person. So myself, I'm just surprised that I was interested and willing to step into that. And now that I have, I understand the power of these medicines, and I really want to help people have great experiences, but also use them as sacred medicines, right? So it's important to really understand the bigger picture of what they're here for and what they can do for people.
Yeah, definitely. And so how are you psychedelic working with pharmaceutical companies? That was in your bio. How does that work?
Yeah. Well, I do some advising for some smaller startup companies, because there's over 250 proper pharmaceutical companies that are studying different molecules. So I don't know how many of them now are actually traded on the stock exchange, but there's several that are on either the Toronto Stock Exchange or the New York Stock Exchange, and they are like big companies. And lots of research is going into psychedelics right now. And so because I come from big pharma, I feel really compelled to offer additional insights from the pharma background, but also from someone who's on a spiritual, awakening journey and has a lot of experience with psychedelics themselves. So I help with some with branding, there's various things that I help with when it comes to advising in that sense. But there's so much research. I think in 2023, this year, we will see our first psychedelics approved on the market. I should say, ketamine is already on the market. So that is technically a psychedelic, and that is available in clinics, proper ketamine clinics. But I think we'll see MDMA, psilocybin, the magic mushrooms is close by. People are studying LSD. I mean, everything, DMT, 5-MeO DMT. So there's a lot, MDMA, MDA. So there's a lot of stuff that's being looked at, and they're looking at it, from a full spectrum, but a lot of the companies are looking at them from a very specific spectrum for a very specific disease type or mental state. And the research right now is amazing, and I'm just thrilled to see that they're taking a FDA route and really looking at clinical data. And and then with that said, I'll counter that and say, well, there's also some potential less than advantageous things when we get to a really clinical setting, because we know the magic is in holding the space, right? And in a clinical setting and having, let's just say, an LSD journey, it's going to be very different than if you're sitting in a loving space with someone who understands the multidimensional realms and can really hold the space with you. So there's some downsides and some upsides, but I think the major upside is that we at least have potentially, psychedelics that will be approved and on the market. So people won't have to do everything underground, and that it will become more accepted. And I think that's also part of my role, and many others, is to shift the narrative around psychedelics away from the 60s and 70s and the war on drugs. And certainly there are a lot of drugs that there should be a war on. I just don't believe anymore that it's psychedelics. And in fact, psychedelics, the root word is mind manifesting. That's where psychedelics comes from.
Right, mind manifesting. That is really interesting, isn't it? I'm just like intrigued how like from my point of view, like when I've look at my journey and I look at being a counselor and going training people in light working, and then being called into HR corporate, and then being an executive producer, and like all these different things, and I just look at you and go, like, isn't it interesting? Like, I just look at you like a mirror and just go, like, isn't it interesting how we get called into all these weird areas and that we probably wouldn't have found ourselves in, but they all make sense. Like, to look at them, people might go, but to us, there've been this organic process, this journey of course I had to do that, and then that led to that, and of course, and because of those things, and I understood those things, and I could do this very well, and then bring it back here, and it's actually quite like I feel like a symbiotic connection with you on that.
For sure. I think it's so important, just as way showers, or whatever words we want to use, that we shine the light and show the way, right? And allow people to let their own journey unfold, because every soul has a different journey. And to your point, like, neither one of us probably would say that we're going to be sitting here doing this, 10 years later, and we're sitting here going, oh my gosh. And now I see how it all makes sense and how every little bit rolls together. And I think too, that, for the spiritual community, a lot of times we get dinged for that. Like, oh, you don't know what you're doing, or, oh, you're doing this now, or you're doing that now. Why don't you, why don't you get clear on this or this? It's
your niche environment.
We're very clear. It's just, we're clear that this is what we need to be doing now, and this is what we need to be doing now. And then it all does come together at probably sometimes the most unlikely points, right? Right when we're at that point where we're like, wait a second, like universe, like we gotta ring fence all of this and figure this out. And then it all falls together. So I think the message that you talk about too is just like, keep going on the journey, keep going, dive deep, take deep breaths and keep going, because sometimes it can be a little bit lonely, lonely from the perspective of not all of our family and friends understand everything that we're doing, because they're not on the same journey.
No.
And they don't,
and it's hard to, seriously, it's hard to unwrap and explain the journey. And that's why I feel a lot of love and a lot of joy when I see people trying new things in the spiritual community, like yourself. I feel like, you're giving yourself permission to go there. You've been told on some level, whether it's internally or externally, like you just know it, like from hearing it from external spiritual team, but you just know, oh, this is what I need to do. This is my spiritual assignment. I call them spiritual assignments. And you just follow that and not question. And even the journey to follow that, people might not realize that just the journey to follow that can be quite challenging and quite confronting for us, especially if we've been doing a hard left and then we go a hard right. But it's all connected. And I celebrate. So in 10 years time, if you're doing something completely different, like hula hooping, I don't even know, but whatever it is, I'm just going to go,
Yes. Yeah. Well, and I think, just another little plug for psychedelics, that when people are ready for them, you feel called to them. But what they do is they give you that extra clarity away from all of the external environment programs
like
that work on us so hard, so that we can just really hear our soul. And I know we achieve that in meditation, and we achieve that through bowls, healing bowls. There's so many different ways that we can access our soul. So it's not like psychedelics are the thing, no, but they just help us just go a little bit deeper in all of our practices. We still go back to the practices, we still use all of the spiritual tools, but it just helps us heighten just a little bit more our sensitivity around being in our body and really living our soul's plan, as opposed to listening to that darn ego mind, which can be very helpful, but a lot of times is filled with a bunch of gibberish.
Do you think it quietens it, or do you think it turns it up really loud so that you can tell it's really loud and you ignore it and then just focus? Do you think it's both? It could be both?
No, I on a journey, your ego mind is significantly quieted, if not turned off, depending upon what you're doing, depending upon dose. So, it's so every journey is going to be different. Even if you do the same medicine, the second journey is going to be very different than the first one. But where I think that the ego mind does come back on and starts to speak very loudly. So you're in the journey, it's all quiet, you're hearing your higher self, and you just have the knowingness, just like when you sit in meditation, you get those hits, you're just like, oh, that's really clear. And I just know that within myself. But when you come out of the journey, and this is why the work is so important for integration, is that the mind starts to come up back online, like, oh man, I almost lost my job there. Like, whoa, I gotta get back in here, and I gotta tell this person like who they are and what they need to be. And Beth Bell is this character with these, these characteristics and this personality. And it's like, okay, yeah, I am all those things, but I'm not. I'm one. And so you come to this place where you go, oh, okay, now I really hear my mind, and I know that's my mind, because the difference, it's like you go, because I think that's also part of the journey, is we get confused sometimes. You're like, well, wait, is that my mind or is that really spirit? And so it does help you with that sensitization, but it's after you come out of the journey. It's once you're back here and you're integrating all the learnings that you're bringing in, and then you're listening to the mind and you're like, okay, yeah, no, I get that sneaky little one. Like that's not true. That's not true.
Yeah. And I mean, like for someone like myself, like part of that integration process would be acknowledging that there is a voice that has something to say. And it may come from a place of fear. So how can we then have a look at that, not reject it and throw it out with the bath water, like the baby with the bath water? How can we go, oh, okay, that got loud after I came out. So there's some resistance around that idea of what I just learned. And it's really turned the volume up on this particular aspect of my ego, myself. And it is scared and it wants to create some noise. It wants to shake things up or block it away or whatever. So the integration process would be, how do we explore supporting that part of myself so that it doesn't feel it's running on fear with regards to what we just learned. Would you agree with that? Like, that's what I would do.
Yeah, I think it's great.
Yeah, cool. Because I think a lot of people sort of like they poo-poo, like once you step into higher self, it's almost like everything else should be just shush. But I think, no, it's okay to bring the higher self to that aspect of ourselves, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And I mean, as you know, every time we break through one belief, one limiting belief or one illusional belief, then we just get tested with the next level of beliefs. And whether they're our own, they're ancestral, or they're, societal thought constructs that are, just like, well, this is the way it is. Well, you actually know this isn't the way it is. And I think, not to get into this topic, but I think that's also where COVID came in so helpful for us to understand some of the narratives that are going on out there and the fear experiment that was happening. And it's all about, and this was the big lesson I feel from COVID for everyone, was get to your inner space, find your inner self, your inner wisdom, because there's more to come. Like it's more and more and more. It's always going to happen. We're going to get the next, initiation with whatever it is, right? Whether it's a natural disaster or whatever, but it's always your internal state. That's the only thing that you really have dominion over. You have no control over the external world, the external state, the things that are happening. And so it's that inner peace. In fact, in the introduction of my book, one of the things that I say at the very end is I say, love is the new currency. How rich are you? And I think that's really where we're headed. I think all light workers out there, all, people on their deep spiritual journey, the tides are going to turn. And people are going to go, wait a second, I want what you have. There's a lot of people that have struggled and they have such incredible gifts to offer and they haven't quite, made it. Well, financially, maybe, right? Yeah. But they've made it. They've made it because they understand the power of what their modality is that they're bringing to help bring the inner peace and the inner wisdom forward. So yeah, I think the time is now to just keep diving deep within and really understand your own inner wisdom, because that is the true north. When you're connected to source, as you know, when you're connected, then it really doesn't matter. Yes, things will happen and things will still be human. We'll still have a human emotion. We'll still have a human reaction, but it doesn't have to be a reaction that harnesses the trauma within us. We just allow it to go through. Like I learn a lot from my Bali dog, Lily. You watch animals. What do they do when something bad happens? They shake it off, right? They shake it off and let all the energy go. Yep. And it's just something we didn't get taught. It's also something I talk about in the book. I went to a shaking ashram in Bali, and we shook for 3 times a day for 2 hours apiece. So 6 hours a day, we shook violently our body. And I thought at the time it was like the craziest thing I'd ever done, but I kind of was doing all the different modalities. And I thought, let me check this one out. Everybody's talking about it. And by the end of it, I said, I am never coming back here. This is all so crazy. And when I left the ashram, I realized exactly what had happened and how I had shook a lot out. And by, when we shake the lower vibration out, what happens? The light comes in and, and you walk around a lot lighter and brighter. And so another one of my nevers then was, I went back to the shaking ashram 3 times with Ratu Bagus, and
Yeah.
And each time had bizarre experiences, but yeah, it all has to do with our Kundalini energy and, bringing our highest vibration within our body without blowing our circuits. And that's why there's a process. And that's why it's a journey. It's not like just overnight, we're going to, suddenly, turn from an old Nokia phone to like the latest iPhone, right? There's all the steps in between. So,
and they're all, and honestly, when people think they have so far to go, but I just like to say to people, but each little step is a huge step. Like,
yes.
we feel it. Like, I celebrate that. Like, no matter how small, it's a big step. It's a huge step. So I'm off to Bali this week. So I'm looking forward to spending a couple of weeks over there. And it's interesting because not the last time I was in Bali, but the time before was around about the same time. And I remember on Valentine's Day, I went round and took all these pictures of photos and of flowers, and they were absolutely gorgeous. And I got so many of them; it's ridiculous. And I'm excited because it's like the same time. It's almost like we're going over there. We're going to be there for Valentine's Day again.
Well, I'm super
excited.
Because I lived there for 5.5 years and had my brick and mortar shop on Monkey Forest Road. I had developed what I call the Savvy Insider's Guide. So it's on my website, but I'm happy to gift it to you. So when you're going, I'll give you all my favorite places. They're in Ubud though. Ubud stands for medicine, and it's one of the sacred places on Bali for healing, and the Champuan River. And so if you want any, I know you've been there many times and I'm sure you're an expert, but the Savvy Insider's Guide also gives some interesting tips. So I'm happy to share that.
That's so wonderful. Thank you. Appreciate that. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. And it's the first overseas holiday that I will have had now since 2018. So wow. I know it's like usually we do something every year or two, so it's a long time. We had booked a trip to Greece in 2020, but we had to cancel that. We're going to go Greek islands and things like that. But we thought, because everything's still kind of calming down, like let's do Bali first and then sort of see how. When did you end up going back to LA?
In the late 2018, I came back to the United States, and then I was on the East Coast and spent a few months there, and then went to Arizona and thought I was going to spend a few months there and stayed a year because my family's there, and then moved to Southern California in 2020, just before COVID. So so I'm near San Diego actually. So I'm down the coast, but it's a beautiful. I'm right next to the Yogananda Self-Realization Fellowship. So I don't know if any viewers are familiar with Yogananda, but he's the guy that brought the yoga to the West. And I don't know if he spent time in Australia, but I'm sure he must have.
Rings a bell, Yogananda. Maybe I've seen a documentary on him.
Yeah, you probably can.
So you've just been recording your audio book the last day or so, and I'm super honored that, because I know it must be taxing for your voice and everything to do that. I feel like I'm part of the audio book or something. You know what I mean? Like mid-audio book, and here we are. I sort of feel like I'm in the book somehow, like energetically because of that.
Believe it or not, I think we're going to be in the studio like 10 to 15 hours or more in the recording of it. So it's a huge project, not one that will be done soon. But yes, I appreciate that. You start to understand your vocal cords in a whole different way as you're talking so much each day and doing something like an audio book. But yeah. And so what's next for you? You're basically busy promoting this book. Have you got anything else happening this year that's exciting? Yeah, well, actually, the book is kind of only the beginning, because as I mentioned before, there's the Awakening and Healing Handbook, because, I've shared my stories, but I really didn't share my stories because I wanted everybody in the world to know my stuff. I shared my stories because I knew it was a way for others to share in community, because that's how we heal together. Exactly. And so there's also the Awakening and Healing Handbook, which gets into deeper modalities. I also have a book, Bliss Book Club, people can come to and participate in. And then there's live shows on YouTube that will start in February, where people can come and ask questions about the stories in the book. They can bring their own questions from their own life, and we'll have a live dialogue. And again, so that it's a one-to-one discussion, but it's out on one-to-many, so that we can all learn from all the stories that are discussed. So yeah, so that's the big project here in 2023. So
awesome. That sounds fantastic. I'm excited for you. And I'll definitely keep my eyes out for that. I've been wanting to open up enlightened conversations more, like I guess a Q&A kind of style too. And we're planning like live streams with more questions from people. And I'm kind of looking at questions like the bigger picture questions, not so much, what do I do about my, teenage daughter, not that kind of stuff, but more, what does it mean when we feel something in our body when we're listening to someone on a live stream, something like that, those kind of questions that, people, what do I do about it? That kind of questions, or how do I deal with it kind of stuff. So, just that community engagement is cool. Like, and it's alive, and it brings forth, I think, that unity consciousness, because we're all in this together. Everybody's a mirror. We've all got questions, and I like to encourage that kind of so I'm trying to kind of work out how to do that too. So we've got some Facebook live streams happening on that. But yesterday when we were meant to record, and I thought it was yesterday instead of today, even though we changed it, and I accidentally turned up for it. I'm like, here I am. Okay. That was funny. But what happened for me was I got guided for the first time to have an enlightened conversation. I actually had a meditation on Monday. And the episode I'm talking about now will air after ours. So this is interesting, because I want yours to air next week. So I basically had a meditation with my spiritual team, and they basically said, we'd like you to share a conversation from us to everyone. So I did that yesterday. When I had the space, because I was all like ready, I was like, and I wasn't planning it, and I thought I did something like that when I got back from Bali. I didn't think I'd do it, and so it kind of like the universe gave me a little bit of a nudge. That's why I said it was such a gift.
Yeah.
So I did that, and it was kind of interesting because like stuff that we've talked about today, I talk about on the next episode that I recorded yesterday, which is a lot of that, like when you turn up for the thing that you need to with the trauma, and you let go, things present themselves. It was really interesting. So I just wanted to say it was really connected and intertwined with our energy.
Yeah, lovely. Yeah. Well, great. This is so wonderful. I'm so glad we did this.
Me too. So where can people find you? Is it bethbell.me? Is that the website?
Bethbell.me.
And it's Beth, BETH, Bell, BELL. .me. Yes, just so I've got that correct. And so thank you so much for joining us, and I'm looking forward to seeing how everything unfurls this year for you, Beth, and I'm just big love to you for everything that you're doing in the world, and all the insight that you're bringing forward, and all the unity consciousness that you're trying to encourage, as well as owning our own individual selves and our higher selves and our light. So I just want to say thank you from the bottom of my heart to you for all that beautiful energy you're putting out.
And thank you to you for everything that you do. This is amazing. So yes, we'll shine the light together.
Shining, yes, definitely. And thank you all so much for joining us for another episode of Enlightened Conversations. My Enlightened Conversation that I had with my spiritual team will air next Thursday the 16th of February, so a week after this one, and I look forward to hearing how that all goes. So thank you so much, everybody, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.